Right. So can we have both?
Yeah.
We can have both. Thanks.
Just don't remember to press stop.
Yeah, and then to swap between them.
Yeah. So
Maybe if you go this slide, and if you go up a little bit more. This slide is the first animated one.
Sure. So you can just switch between it. So and you present from current slide when you need to.
Okay, come back and click it.
Yeah.
And then I go back to PDF.
Yeah, and then your PDF will just.
And I can still use the clicker for the PDF.
No, you won't. You'll have to scroll, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah.
Scroll. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Karen, is this mic working?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Great. Let me just see if I can. Okay, great. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm Giselle Sebag, the Executive Director of the International Society for Urban Health, and we are a 20-year-old nonprofit organization based in New York City, but working around the world with the mission to create cities that support the health and well-being and are equitable for everyone in all places in all cities worldwide. We were founded in 2002, really because at that time there was a lack of a focus on the very distinct, complex, and interrelated determinants of health in urban environments, which were different than other environments. And as we know, cities are where the majority of people in the world live and where they will continue to live as they continue to grow around the world. And the Accelerating City Equity Project is what I want to speak to you all about a little bit today. We are not researchers per se, but we work with an incredible network of more than 4,000 leaders in urban health around the world, people like yourselves who are helping us to better understand how we can create cities that support health and well-being for all. And we're really focused in much of our work, but especially in this one, on research translation. So taking the great work that you all are doing and translating it into impact for people on the ground. And in this case, we're focused on health equity. So we're really thinking about the people who need the most support and have the greatest opportunity to improve health. Great, so we'll just run through these aspects very quickly. And so I know we spent a lot of time in this conference talking about modeling and the way that climate impacts all of us, but I just want to remind us a little bit about what all that means for people. And our health, as you all are very familiar, it's determined by these three main factors. And the main point of me showing you this today is because I want to talk about the really good news. And the really good news is that the research continues to show that genetics are actually a pretty small portion of your health outcomes. So really most of the studies are saying that it's 10% or less of your health is determined by things you cannot change. Those are your genetics, the things you're born with. But what does that mean? That means that 90% actually of our health outcomes can be modified and they can be changed. And that means that we all have this great opportunity to create environments that support health and well-being holistically for all of us through modifiable changes to our environment and how that actually impacts our modifiable lifestyle behaviors. So sometimes behavior is thought of as something that's completely within your control, and I'd like to push back against that because you really can't make choices that are good for your health unless you live in an environment that support that opportunity. You can't really walk if you don't have a sidewalk, things like that. I wanted to show you this little animation, which I'm not sure if it's going to work. Let me see. From current slide. Does that work? Okay. Oh, it's sort of, that's okay. No worries. I don't want to slow us down here. But basically, what this does show, it's from our friends at IS Global that we work really closely with, the Barcelona Institute for Global Health. And we're just showing here some of the key ways that urban environments impact our health. And what you'll see, I know it's a little small, but what you can see is that there's a huge number of really important health impacts that our urban environments do have. And again, key message here, we can change that to improve health for all of us. Now I have to go back to the other slide, sorry. I'm sorry. We'll maybe skip the other animation. I think it's too hard. Okay, great. Yeah, okay. So thanks to Scott for introducing this concept already. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the place-based determinants of health. And Scott introduced that in terms of some of the climate aspects. But this is really looking at overarching life expectancy numbers. So this is New York City, but we could take any city around the world today, actually. And the number one most important determinant of how long you're expected to live is actually your postcode, which is kind of crazy. More than anything else, more than your genetics, more than your socioeconomic status, more than your race or your age, well, not your age, but more than all these other factors, it is where you live. And what this map is showing you is that babies born right down the street from one another have drastically different life expectancies based on those two things that I mentioned, the modifiable factors in your environment, how we actually support health and well-being in the neighborhoods that we live in. Pretty incredible, actually. And I think also one key point from this that I want to mention is this could all be the same. Everybody could be living to 90 plus years if we create places, urban environments that are actually geared towards, and we take the science and evidence that we already have, put it into action to support health and well-being for everyone. Since we're talking a little bit about health equity today, I just want to mention how this is about upstream strategies and approaches. So we want to think about prevention in terms of supporting health and well-being for all before people get sick to help prevent. And that's where you get the biggest ROI, actually. Once someone is already sick, it's pretty difficult to cure them and then put them back into the environment that made them sick in the first place. So we're talking about changing your environment upstream. And this might be a little bit surprising, but I talk a lot to audiences from other sectors and disciplines that all have a role to play in urban health. But when you think about urban health and the people that are shaping the neighborhoods that we live in and why there are the disparities that I was showing and that Scott mentioned, most of those decisions, the large majority of those decisions are being made by people who are not thinking explicitly about the health impacts of those decisions, but actually by people that are coming from outside the health sector, urban planners, private sector developers, even policymakers. Most of them are not trained in health. They don't know the research, they don't know the evidence, and they're not thinking about how that really changes our lives. And I want to mention that because we've got to bring everybody into the decision-making process. We've got to equip people with the research and the knowledge that you all have to make the decisions that will impact health and well-being in a positive way. So I think I'm probably getting close to time because we have such a short time together today, but just wanted to outline some of the key climate health impacts on specifically the urban poor. And we work with people all over the world. Urban poor can be in any country, in the United States included, certainly. Great, thank you. But specifically those that are most vulnerable, those that are left out, those that live in those neighborhoods that are not getting to the life expectancy outcomes that we would expect. And obviously, there's very direct health impacts from climate change. Everyone here has been talking so much about this, very familiar with this, but flooding, heat really do affect people, especially older people, and it leads to mortality that is premature and could be prevented. Disease vectors continue to be a huge issue as climate change continues. We see so many more vector-borne diseases around the world, and in places that don't have proper sanitation, water sanitation, hygiene infrastructure, that is a major issue that we're seeing. Mental health, this is sort of a growing area of concern. There's a lot of mental health impacts, not only of continued extreme climate events, but also things that are a little bit more basic in terms of land use policy. In many places around the world, there are people who are either undocumented or do not have legal land tenure, meaning they don't legally own their home, and they face the threat of eviction at any moment, every single day. We continue to see migration around the world because of climate change, and that leads to some really severe mental health impacts. We've talked a lot about heat, but we haven't talked as much around how that actually connects to health. And heat islands are really quite extreme, and as we know, they are causing premature mortality around the world. And then air quality. So this is actually a little video from our friends at iSchool. It's really good if you ever want to check it out. But there's so much research that's coming out more and more about how awful our air quality is. And if you see here, I put some stats that probably many of us are familiar with, but 98% of cities in low and middle income countries don't meet the air quality standards by WHO, which many people think are actually not even rigorous enough. But in higher income countries, actually, it's still 56%. What that means is that the large majority of people in the world today, all of us included, are living in places where the air quality is not what it should be, and it has detrimental effects on our health. And that is for adults, but it's also especially for young people, for children, and for pregnant women. Really, really bad outcomes, totally preventable. And then the health benefits of natural spaces and green spaces. So this is another area that I am really excited about. Our friends at ICE Global are really leading so much research in this space, but there are really important health benefits of greens, having inner space or exposure to nature, spending time outdoors. I guess it's a little blurry, unfortunately, but for adults, there's some really big important impacts: mental health, certainly cognitive learning abilities, but for children, the impacts are even greater. So this Accelerating City Equity Project, I'm going to have to just run through it because of time, but we have started this, this project around the world because there was really a lack of resources and tools for people to drive equity in sustainable development projects around the world. And it is practice oriented, actually. So what were we hoping to find? We wanted to just get basic learning and knowledge about how you can drive equity in sustainable development practice. And what we did is we set up 6 different regional hubs with wonderful equitable development leaders. Many of you are in the room today. Thank you. We're having our Oceania regional meeting. We had it this week here in line with the conference. And we learned from people who've been driving this equitable development practice with implemented projects. And so now we're in the second phase of this, and we are trying to analyze what we've learned to create some tools and some resources so that any of us in any field can drive greater equity in their work. So what have we learned so far? It might seem like some of us, I don't know, here in Sydney, maybe it might seem at first glance that we don't have much to learn from women living in informal settlements in Ahmedabad. But in fact, what we found is that equity challenges are common around the world, and therefore the solutions are transferable, always specifically adapted and tailored to cultural context and to the needs, because the community needs to be driving that process. But some of the overarching ideas are universal. We defined equity specific to this project because there's not a widely understood definition of what that means. And here's what we found so far. There are enabling conditions that can help us to drive equity. And in fact, we need to have a little bit of all of these to drive true equity that is sustainable over time. And then there are 5 actions that you can take. So if you don't have all those enabling conditions in place, most places do not, then we actually have found that you can take these actions, and that's going to improve your ability to drive equity at the community level over time. We are doing some storytelling where we're actually in the field talking to people about their experiences, what worked, what didn't work. There's a project in Ahmedabad about cool roofs, and I'm out of time, so I'm just going to show you the pictures. It's some pretty amazing work led by women, and it's made some really substantial impacts, not only on health, but also economic opportunity. And then another one in Rio that we wanted to show you from an informal settlement who did a biodigester project there to create energy for themselves. Pretty cool stuff. We also have a diagnostic and step-by-step tool that we'll be launching as part of this is our website that'll be launching at the end of the year. And we have some activities here, and we invite you to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about we have just one question? I'd love to open the floor to ECRs, early career researchers who are in the room. Does anyone identify as an ECR who would like to ask a question today?